All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'd like to welcome Christeen Badie to the show today. How are you, Christeen?
I'm doing well. How are you, Rich?
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited to learn more about you and what you do. So with that being said, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founder and therapist at Holistic Living Co., where I provide individual therapy, premarital counseling, and then I also have a consulting arm of the business. So I am a licensed social worker, very proud to be a social worker. It is March, which is Social Work Month. So happy Social Work Month to all the social workers out there who do very important work.
Yeah, thanks, Christeen. Yeah, I did not know it was a social worker month. I'm going to have to give a shout out to all my social worker friends. So thanks for that. Yeah, super cool. So when clients first sit down with you, Christeen, what do you think they're nervous about?
Yeah, so I think a lot of questions come up for folks that they are probably thinking through when they are considering therapy or considering a specific therapist, right? So that could be something like, can I trust this person with my deepest, darkest thoughts, feelings, and experiences? They might also be asking, will this person understand me? Or will I have to hide, code switch, excessively explain something? They might be thinking, will they judge me for feeling or thinking this way? Do they really have the ability to help me? And can therapy even help me? So, those are just some questions that people might be nervous about and are contemplating.
Oh yeah, and I can imagine somebody who's reaching out to a therapist to be kind of experiencing these things, right? Because therapy is not something that's easy. You know, you're inviting somebody into your personal world and trying to work out a problem. So I could imagine these questions kind of
Absolutely.
going through somebody's mind.
Yeah.
Christine, with that being said, outside of your professional identity, how do you stay grounded? Like, what helps you feel grounded?
Yeah, so I love spending time with my husband and my dog, and we like to go on walks in nature at the parks or on the beach. We also really like to try new foods and restaurants. And then also I enjoy to go my dance classes, Zumba classes, cycling. And then one of my biggest hobbies is actually decorating and designing interior spaces. So I also spend some of my days doing that.
That is so cool, Christine.
Yeah.
A lot of cool hobbies there. Christine, what I know about you is that you specialize in serving immigrants, children of immigrants,
Yeah.
the Arab population.
Yeah.
Um, how did you choose that particular population to work with when there's so many out there to choose from?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And, of course, I don't deny services to anyone. If folks feel that I'm the right fit for them, I welcome the opportunity to work with them on their healing journey. This particular population I specialize in because I am an immigrant. I came to the US as a child. And as a child, I didn't choose it and I didn't love it. I had to live between two cultures. And I think a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants will identify with this idea. Not Egyptian enough, which is where I'm from, to be Egyptian, and never really American enough to be American. And so I also identify as Arab. So I know all too well the struggle of having to code switch, to suppress my anger and grief, to survive in this country, and to feel like I'm being accepted. So I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough for either of those worlds. I've lived the exhaustion of having to change the way I speak or act in a professional setting, or even sometimes outside of that setting. And so I focus on this community because you shouldn't have to leave your culture at the door when you are seeking mental health support. In fact, we honor culture, and it's really important to the identities that we carry with us every day. So we want to bring that into the therapeutic relationship and into therapy. So I found that it was hard to find mental health providers who understand that experience, who understand the culture, and even the vast ways that our religions, whether you are Muslim or Christian, Arab or Jewish, etc., it does become a part of the way that we live in our cultures. And so there was this huge gap. And I recognize that for many other communities as well, finding a therapist who really understands the weight of family expectations, which are huge in our cultures, and other multicultural issues that folks are presenting with, it can sometimes feel impossible. And so I felt like it was my professional mission, as I have been dedicating this professional mission for the last 14 years of my career, to really increasing access to services. And that includes culturally responsive care. Because like I said, everyone deserves a space where their identity isn't a barrier to their progress, but it is recognized as part of the strength that they bring to therapy. And so I wanted to be there and to be able to walk that path of healing with folks.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible, Christine. And I really appreciate that you bring a lot of your own lived experience to the
Yeah.
work that you do. And I think that
Yeah.
is really important to your clients and their healing. Speaking of culture,
Yeah.
why is culturally responsive therapy important for healing?
Yeah. I think it's really important because I just talked a little bit about identities. And our identities, when we think about who you are, you're not just rich to yourself, you are rich within an entire environment and an entire community, in wherever that may be and wherever you live. So that identity is intertwined with your family, with your community, with histories, the histories of your families, of people in your community, and the experiences that you and others in your community have had. So, who we are, how we think, how we feel, how we learn to look at the world, who we choose to be in life with, even when we think about our partners, our self image and our worth, and almost every decision that we make, when you think about it, is filtered in our minds through the lens of experiences and histories. And so those experiences are absolutely connected to our cultural, our ancestral history, and oftentimes our family patterns. And so when you think about this for a minute, if you reflect on a decision you made recently, for example, you probably considered a bunch of different things when you were making that decision. And so, for example, you might have been worried about, um, you know, your family's well-being, what society or your community will think, maybe your upbringing, your religion, what does your religion teach you about this particular topic? So all of those things you considered, and those are cultural factors. There are cultural factors that you are considering in making that decision. So we can't heal wounds in therapy if we don't recognize and understand and validate every part of our identity. And culture, again, like I mentioned, is a huge part of that. And so we need to talk about it. We need to consider that it's important when we talk about deep, true, and long-lasting healing, because we're looking at a person in the environment. And this is very much a social work perspective. We're looking at a person in the environment and not just a person by themselves. And so as therapists, we have a responsibility to bring in a person's culture and which family legacies and beliefs are truly theirs to carry and which ones they can let go of. Because at the end of the day, a person's identity includes their culture, and that does impact their mental health. So it's really important to untangle that.
Wow. Yeah. So
Yeah.
many threads to pull on with what you just said, Christine, that I don't think we'll have time for. But yeah, and I do appreciate that the social worker perspective really takes into
Mhm.
account and consideration
Yeah.
the environment, and the situation, the setting, the people, the narratives, like everything that's going on
Yeah.
outside of just the individual client, and because there is something we said about clients like thinking I'm depressed, I'm hurt, I'm stressed, they were like really thinking about the self. And part of the healing is untangling, like you said,
Right.
all of the other narratives and everything that's connected in there. So
Right.
thank you for that insight. Yeah.
Yeah. And which narrative is really yours? Is
Mhm.
that a narrative that's coming from you? Or is that something that society put on you because you heard it somewhere? Or is that something that comes from trauma because of how you were treated in a certain setting, for example? So that is part of the untangling process that we're working through. And to your point, Rich, we can do an entire podcast series just around culture, but we'll leave that for another time. And I just kind of try to give a high level
Yeah.
overview there.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that insight, Christine. So if a client is hearing this, they're listening to you speak, they like what you have to say, they resonate with it, but they're kind of hesitant about reaching out to a therapist or even you because maybe they've never been to therapy, maybe this is new for them. What would you want them to hear?
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that. I completely get that. And I know it can feel really scary to try something new, especially to take on a healing journey. And healing journey requires that you feel everything. And it's discussing some of your deepest wounds. And it's hard to figure out, like, I don't know this person and can I trust them in the beginning? And what are they thinking? This is hard. I get it. My belief is simple. We all deserve to heal. We all deserve to live out a life that every part of us loves and is happy in, feels worthy, heard, and seen in. And so by taking that very scary first step, you are honoring yourself by giving yourself the opportunity to heal. And if you don't find a therapist that feels like the right fit for you that first time, that's okay. Try again. Because there are thousands of therapists out there and hundreds of different therapeutic modalities. And so there is a place for you to thrive instead of just survive. And so that to me is the most important message that I want to make sure to get out there for folks. If you talk to someone and you don't feel like they're the right person, try again, try a different therapist. And it is really important that you feel that connection.
Christine, yeah, what a wonderful message, and I really do hope and encourage the viewer who's watching this to partner with you because I really do believe that you care about your work, and a lot of these narratives and the social work perspective that you bring to the table can be really meaningful to change. I like to switch gears a little bit, Christine, and ask about some specifics of your work. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
So, do you think that traditional kind of individual focused therapy, in some ways, can fall short when working with people who are from more collectivist cultures? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I don't think it's fair to say necessarily that it falls short. I do think individual work is very important to heal because we know we can only change ourselves. We can't change others, and we can't change others' responses to things that are happening. We can only change ourselves. And so that is important. But sometimes it's also not enough for many people because, like I said, we need to look at the person in their environment. And so in collectivist cultures like my own and societies where I come from, we often look at healing as a family and community responsibility. And I'm saying responsibility, not accountability, because those are completely different things. And we're not going to go into accountability and abuse in this conversation either. So we are talking about responsibility here. So now what might be some of those examples of what does it mean to be in a collective society where healing is the responsibility of a family or a community? So some examples might be that, in your culture, you're really used to going to Sunday school, at church with other kids, where you learn wisdom and the teachings of the Bible, for example, from elders or church leaders. Or you go to an Islamic youth group, again, for kind of the same purpose to teach you values and wisdom and the teachings of the Quran. It could be you're from a culture that uses arts or music or cultural rituals around healing and feeling like you're in community and connection. Again, that's very important. Connection is very important. It could be that you have developed, or other people in the community have developed, a culturally specific community organizing group to advocate for the rights of people or a specific population. So all of those are considered healing practices that happen in community. So while I recognize and also can hold true that our own communities can sometimes feel like they can be harmful, we can choose what to take and how to participate in alignment with what feels right for us. Because connection and repairing ruptures in relationship, which this might have a different viewpoint if you're an individualistic society, but connection and repairing ruptures in relationship and finding community is really important to creating a strong system of care for all of us. So it's not just the work that happens in the therapy room, it's also the work that happens outside of the therapy room. That's important.
Wow. Yeah. Great insight, Christine. And so much to be said about what you just mentioned because, yeah, it is really important, right? To be able to acknowledge all of those things and be able to consider them on the healing journey. When somebody asks something like, or they think something like, I don't know if therapy is going to help me.
Yeah.
There's maybe a little bit of doubt, maybe they're reluctant, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
What's usually underneath that, whether it's doubt or confusion? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there's a modality called internal family systems model. Some people might have heard it being referred to as parts work. So this idea of internal family systems means or says that we have different sides to us as individuals. It's similar to, you could say we have different identities. We kind of went into our identity a little bit earlier. So for example, a part of you is a driven professional, but then another part of you just wants to hide under the covers and literally like not come out for days. So in therapy, we get all those parts together in the same room so that we can understand why they are doing what they are doing. And most of the time, when we look at the different parts, they're there to protect us from something. And so, for example, there might be a part of you that is so scared about doing something. And that part is working really hard to protect you from getting hurt because if you do something new, you're taking a risk and that could lead to being hurt. And then we'll take this a little bit to trauma. And I should have done this earlier. Just want to give a trauma warning to folks. We are going to be talking a little bit about trauma today. So just want to make sure folks feel supported wherever they are as they continue to listen to this conversation. So for people who have been traumatized, they are often filtering things through a lens of something is going to go wrong. Why? Because they have had something go wrong before, and so they are protecting themselves from something else happening, and that is kind of the brain's response to trauma. And so the brain has literally been rewired to protect the person from being re-traumatized by keeping them alert and in survival mode. So it's completely normal. And I want to emphasize it's completely normal to doubt that therapy may help because again, you're filtering it through the system and the experiences that you've had. And it's important to understand that that fear that you have, that therapy might not work, serves a purpose. And what we encourage folks to do is assess if you're actually in real danger right now. And if you're not in real danger right now, and the answer is no, then you can decide to do something different and try to heal those wounds by seeking out support.
Yeah, that's so good, Christine. Yeah, that's incredible, and I think you really did a great job of really addressing that doubt because, and framing it in that way that the brain is wired to protect the individual and kind of push away from what's unknown and the
Yeah.
uncertainty. So, yeah, I think that's great insight.
Mhm.
On your bio, it says that you're trained in brain spotting,
Yeah.
and that there's so much there, right? Like, what does that even mean? Like, how does it work? How
Mhm.
does it help? For somebody who's never heard of brain spotting, can you kind of share a little bit of how it works?
Yes. So I like brain spotting because it's pretty universal. Most people can tolerate this treatment modality, and it has been used to treat trauma, PTSD, anxiety, panic, chronic stress, grief, shame, and performance blocks. The basic idea of brain spotting is that where you look affects how you feel. So certain eye positions, or in the brain spotting, it's called brain spots, seem to connect to a stored emotional pain or unfinished stress response in your nervous system. So think of a brain spot like a physical knot in a muscle, for example. Your eyes help us find exactly where that emotional knot is held in your brain so that we can finally let it unwind. Brain spotting is a gentle therapy that helps your brain find and release an experience that impacted you that got stuck. So we use where your eye is looking, like I mentioned, to log into that place during the session so that you can have your nervous system process that experience. And when you are processing that, we are noticing what's happening in the body so that your nervous system can slowly process it and let it go. Some people, I know you've had other guests that have talked about EMDR a little bit. So and EMDR is very well known. It has been around since the 80s. So both brain spotting and EMDR, they are similar. They both use eye positions and the body, and they both tap into the brain and the nervous system. EMDR is clear, and it is great for clear specific traumas, like a car crash, an assault, something that might have been a single incident. It's an 8-phase process. And it's good for people who like structure. Brain spotting is great for what is called complex or developmental trauma, which is multiple traumas, multiple things that someone may have experienced. For example, that could have been ongoing childhood abuse. That might have been more than one incident, but they are interconnected somehow. So brain spotting is good for that, and it is a gentler, less scripted feel in the session. And so it's good for those who want to be more in control of the process, I would say.
Yeah, well, that's what a great explanation, Christine, because it is a whole world, right? There's like hours and hours and like whole
Yeah.
classes you can take on it, and I think you really summarized it really well. And it sounds like brain spotting is a really great option for individuals who are kind of dealing with trauma, primarily to go and maybe seek out a brain spotting certified specialist. I don't know what they're called, but a clinician that is credentialed in brain spotting. That's really cool. Brain spotting is not also the only thing you're trained in, right? Like you have a whole arsenal of tools in your toolbox.
Yeah.
How do you decide which one to use with your clients?
There are many modalities, and there's not a one size fits all. So that is the most important message I want to get out for folks. So when we talk about how do I decide what to use with the client, the answer is I work collaboratively with the client to decide together what is the best care option for them. We know that, again, like I said, not everything is a one size fits all. So, like most things in healthcare, there's not one perfect way to treat something. So, for example, let's say someone has a broken arm. You could operate on the broken arm, you could put a cast in it, or you could get physical therapy for it. Or the treatment for it might be a combination of those three things. It just depends on how and where the arm is broken and how the arm and the individual are responding to each of these treatments. It's very similar in mental health. How can we say there's one perfect modality for everyone to use? So there are many factors that we need to consider as therapists when we're working with someone. So something like, what is the client presenting with? What are called symptoms? What community supports and resources do they have? What are their strengths? What are their needs? So this is why most therapists will say that they use a combination of modalities in their work. And I want to go back to trauma for a minute because it's really important when we talk about modalities. And when we mention trauma, specifically someone who's been traumatized by abuse, what happens when someone is abused? The abuser used power and control, and they took away that person's autonomy and consent. And as a result of that, that creates deep-seated self-doubt and questions about their worth. So that filtering system kind of that we were talking about before. So when I see clients who have been traumatized, in the beginning, it's difficult for them to get used to this idea of choice and consent in the therapeutic relationship. And that's completely understandable. And my hope out of this conversation and all the work that I do with people who have been traumatized through abuse is to trust that in the healing process, we are working to give them back power, control, and autonomy. And we do that by working collaboratively together, by getting consent for every single part of the process and what we are doing. They are aware of what we are doing at all times. And even when I am going to give reflections back and insights on what I am hearing or I am seeing, I am asking for consent to provide those insights. And so it's really important for a person to understand that that is part of the process, and it's important so that they can begin to heal and to trust themselves again and their intuition.
Yeah, yeah. What a great message, Christine. I really appreciate that. I like to ask about collective trauma. There's a
Mhm.
lot going on in the world right now in the country, and maybe you can shed some light on what collective trauma is and how it is currently affecting the immigrant communities right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say people don't come to therapy to say, I am experienced collective trauma, so I'm here for therapy. Most people, when they think about therapy, it's because they're having some kind of symptom. They're sad all the time or they can't get out of bed. But why sometimes is not clear. And that's part of the work that we're doing together. And so when we think about collective trauma, it very much is a thing. And I want to make sure that people also understand what that is. So collective trauma is when there's a whole group of people. I refer to the group of people as a community. Experience trauma. So those things could be like war, whether it's local or abroad, genocide, street violence, a natural disaster, or even when you think back to the health pandemic like COVID-19, that leaves an emotional wound on the community because we all went through that trauma together. So as of the recording of this podcast, Rich, you and I are talking, it's March 2026, and our cities are experiencing ICE violence and violence by Border Patrol. So that includes the murders of American citizens and non-citizens and the rounding up and profiling of primarily brown men and those with accents. So this collective trauma is not just experienced by immigrants and brown people, it's also experienced by the whole collective because we are watching the execution of people on TV and on our cell phones. And so even if we think that this doesn't impact me or this doesn't impact you, you are watching immigrants and their allies and advocates being called awful names, stripped of their humanity, put into what are basically concentration camps, and illegally deported to countries they're not even from. And yes, we have to get political in therapy because This is all part of the experience of a person in their environment. So we have to address that. So whether you are an immigrant or a child of immigrants or an ally, how are you feeling? People are probably feeling traumatized, overwhelmed, worried, heartbroken, scared. This might be them or their loved ones, demoralized by a system that they worked so hard to be a part of. And all that to see that the same system rejects their identity or the identities of those that are close to them. And yet, we still have to go to our high achieving jobs. We still have to go to college or whatever your situation is. When you go to those spaces, you have to perform. You have to pretend like you're okay to not seem weak. You have to fight hard for your colleagues and bosses to see your value. This is not weakness. It's actually perfectly normal human response to trying to survive during collective trauma in a capitalistic society, because we live in a society that has equated value with performing under pressure and work. So this is what happens. And so I also want to say, and I want to be clear, that this is not new. Okay, the story of immigrants and how they are treated in the United States goes all the way back to the foundation of the US and the Chinese Exclusion Act, which again, different topic for different time. So I want to say that for generations, we have carried this generational and migration trauma in our hearts, in our souls, in our minds, and in our bodies, whether we immigrated here ourselves or our parents did. And so resting from all of this trauma that we are experiencing collectively has somehow become something that we have to earn, something that is tied to value and worth that we need to demonstrate all the time. So, but then at the end of it all, the dehumanization of immigrants has never stopped, really. So the point of therapy is we can't change the system, and we definitely can't change what happened. But it's very important to say we can, and we should, as a community of folks, consider that our voices, our power, our community, resting and breathing is how we heal and how we resist. And so that to me is why addressing immigrant mental health is so important. And anyone who's listening to this, who's either a therapist, ask yourself, when did you ever ask someone about their own migration story or the migration story of their ancestors? And if you are a person who's already in therapy, have you ever been asked about that? So I want folks to consider that and to understand that it is a big part of our identity, and it's important to address it too.
Very important things to address in therapy for sure. Christine, if somebody is, wanting to partner with you, and maybe they're looking at multiple therapists, and as you know, in Psychology Today and other platforms, there are tons and tons of listings, and it could be tough to choose a therapist because everybody's highly trained, everybody has specific training and credentials and great bios. What would make your approach the right fit, and when maybe would it not be the right fit?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that earlier, and I want to dig a little deeper here. So I encourage people who are looking for a therapist to speak to at least 2 to 3. You don't want too many because then it becomes overwhelming. But 2 to 3 tends to be a good number before making their decision. And I wouldn't advise making the decision solely based on approach, because like we talked about earlier, there are so many approaches and it's not a one size fits all, etc. It's more important that you're able to connect with that therapist. So use that 15-minute consultation. Most therapists offer them, that are free to talk to that person, to see if their values align with yours, to see if they understand the problems that you're presenting with, etc. And the reason why I say connection is really important, because there's a lot of research out there. It's actually a very well researched topic in psychology, that the quality of the relationship between the therapist and the individual, which is called the therapeutic alliance, is very important. It's in fact one of the strongest predictors of whether therapy actually works or not. And that is more important than the modality that is being used. So I also encourage anybody who is who's listening to this podcast, to take a look at my website. In the FAQ section, I do address this. What are some questions you might want to ask when you are seeking therapy and during your consultation? And I will end with saying that I want to remind folks that you are the expert on your life. And so as a therapist, my role is to be the guide with the map. And if the first map, AKA the first therapist, doesn't feel right, don't throw away that journey. Okay, you deserve to find the right fit. So try again and find someone else who might be a better fit for you.
Yeah, and that's great advice, Christine. And it could be tough, but I do want to encourage the viewer to give it a shot. A lot of clinicians offer free consultation calls, where you can just, do a 15-minute, 30-minute maybe call, or even a Zoom meeting, and just to see if it's a good fit. And really, you have nothing to lose because it's free. And the only thing that it costs you is maybe a few minutes of your time. So I do encourage that. And like anything else in life, you may have to navigate a couple, maybe there's not a right fit the first time. And maybe there's a couple more out there that you got to interview and kind of see if they vibe. But it is worth it, I think, to really, when you find that good therapist, it potentially could be a lifelong relationship. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Christine, how do you define when the struggles that or the concerns that a client presents with are tied to collective um, trauma or generational trauma?
Yeah. So let's kind of define what it means to make progress in therapy first, and then we'll kind of go into collective and generational trauma, because it's very similar. So how do we define progress in therapy? So in general, what that means is you feel more regulated more often. Okay, so again, what does that even mean? Okay, so for example, if you used to have flashbacks, you now have less flashbacks. If you smoke or drink, now you're smoking or drinking less, or you stopped completely. If you were feeling worried all the time, now you're maybe feeling less worried, or less worried more often. If you were feeling down, you're feeling down less often than before. You're sleeping better if you were having sleeping issues. So what this means is, as in whatever symptoms that you came in with when you started therapy, they have decreased in frequency or intensity over time. And so this also means that the things that used to set you off, kept you up at night, start to feel smaller. And progress doesn't mean you're never going to feel triggered again. It means that when you are triggered, you have the tools to come back to yourself more quickly instead of ruminating on it for days on out, for example. So in order to get there, in order to make that progress, you need to process emotions, thoughts, and body sensations. These are the same concepts in how we define progress and struggles for collective and generational trauma. We're going to process emotions, thoughts, and body sensations. And we're going to say, like I mentioned when we talked about collective trauma, have you found your breath, your voice, your community, and your power? Because that is progress in generational and collective trauma. when you begin to untangle those things and how they're impacting you and your community, and then you find that breath, voice, and power.
Yeah, that's a great insight, Christine. I feel like every answer you've given to these questions has been awesome and just full of meaningful insight and suggestions. So I really appreciate it. For those viewers that want to partner with you, they like your style, they like what you have to say, they like what you represent. How can they reach out?
Absolutely. The easiest way is check out the website, holisticlivingco.com. We will drop it down below. And there you can schedule your free 15-minute consultation. And you can also learn a lot more about these different topics and my specialties and all my social justice lens in which I use to do my work will also be on the website. And my email and phone number, you can also text if that is easier. It's all on the website.
Awesome, Christine. Well, thank you so much. This was very informative. I appreciate you coming on the show. And maybe we could do it again in the future. How does that sound?
Absolutely, Rich. Let's do it. I have a ton to talk about.
Heck yeah. Awesome, Christine. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And until the next one, signing out. Bye.